Welcome to Creativism, the show for creatives, filmmakers, Christians, and productivity nerds. I'm your host, Josh the Creative. Okay, so this series actually turned into a 7-part series. Initially, I said it was going to be six part, but I forgot to include this episode, which I had to just now script out because I told myself, or at least I mentioned in the previous episode, I was going to segue into redefining your story. This is in large part going to come from the Millionaire Success Habits book. The books that I'm quoting for this series and other episodes, I've been able to pull like so much out of it. Even if those things are related to finances, they still have power and ability to pour into other areas of life. And I'm applying these different mindsets and mentalities and ideas and topics and stuff into my journey as a creative, as a thinker, as a filmmaker. So in this episode, I want to start off by asking, what story are we telling ourselves? What limiting beliefs are we giving into? So there was an episode previously where I had talked about redefining your job mindset. And this is pretty much an expanse on that sort of small idea of what we're telling ourselves and telling other people initially. In the episode, I talked about how I had a dishwasher mindset where I was telling people I was a dishwasher first and kind of a filmmaker second, if at all. And flipping that around to say I'm a filmmaker primarily and I work this other job to pay the bills. That is a core, that's like a simplified version of redefining your story. But we're going to dive a little more into that concept in this episode. So previously I talked about discouragement and some of the things that we tell ourselves that deter us from moving forward. That's kind of how our story is now, or might be now. We are limiting our belief. We're limiting our potential for success because of certain things that we're telling ourselves. Like we have a lack of finances or a lack of time to put into a project. Our situation isn't right for what we're trying to do. The pandemic is hindering us from trying to do what we're working on. We're not skilled enough for this venture. We're not skilled enough to do this thing. We can't write that book because we don't know enough of the topic or have the time to write, a 200-page book. So I want you to take a moment to really think and consider what limiting belief or story are you telling yourself when you're looking at the next project, when you're looking at potential for a raise at your job, when you're looking at the possibility of reaching your next level in whatever field of profession that you're in, whatever hobby you have, whatever journey you're taking, whatever position you have at church. Really ask yourself, what are you telling yourself? What belief are you allowing to limit you? So those limiting beliefs can discourage us. They can destroy our confidence. So going back to the episode where I talked about working on my short film on Earth in Mind, one of the very first things that I talked about as far as something I learned to do was to write my script, write that story without limits. It was basically a no budget film, but to keep me from missing out on an opportunity for that film to be great just because of lack of capital or lack of resources, I started off writing the film as if I can do anything. I can close down the city of Birmingham so no cars are visible. I can have, all these different crew members to do all this kind of stuff. That's kind of the mindset I went into the project. I talked about finding a balance, being prepared to do the film minimally. And that's kind of how we have to define our story. In a previous episode about failure and discouragement, I touched on understanding what we're called to do. That's at the end of the tunnel. We can't see ourselves there if we're limiting our belief from the get-go. If we're saying, well, I don't really want to do that, or I don't think I can do that. If we start off with that mindset, how do we expect to even walk in line with what we're called to do? And that's why we have to shift from thinking in a failure mindset to a success mindset. Thinking at the beginning, I'm already set to succeed, and I'm pretty much just walking into that success. So one thing, in the Success Habits book, Graziosi mentioned, kind of confessing that story out loud. Like one of the things that I guess it's kind of a small thing, but it's something that has a potential to try to limit me. And it's, I'm not a good enough storyteller to write a good film that's going to change hearts and make impact. I don't have the time to learn. It's that's too big of a task to be able to do, to know how to write a good story. So let's use that as a framework for what limiting belief I'm allowing myself to give into. So if I think that, I don't even know how I can just stumble into succeeding if I'm not even believing that I can succeed. And when I say confess your story, I mean like say it out loud so that you can understand. First you understand the gravity and reality of what you're believing, and also how silly it probably sounds. Another one, and this I didn't plan to talk about, but I'm going to be real. One limiting belief that I have, and this is a little personal, but one limiting belief that I have is my stutter. Like, because I have a massive stutter, I sometimes feel like I can't do what I'm probably called to do. There are some things that I'm going to be doing, I already know I'm going to be doing, that's going to require a lot of talking, like this podcast. It requires talking, obviously. But I've allowed myself in the past to believe there's no way I can talk in front of people. There's no way I can encourage people because I have this stutter. And man, that, like, if I think that, there's no way I'm going to walk into what I'm actually supposed to be doing later on. There's no way I'm going to have the confidence to step in front of people, have conversations with people, talk about or encourage them, give them encouraging words. So, matter of fact, we're going to nix the whole storytelling thing, because that was a small one, and I just wanted a good example, and we're going to get to the real meat and potatoes, the whole stuttering thing. And you may have something physical for you that may be a limit, like, on your mentality. So now that we've confessed it and we've said it out loud, we understood where we are with that belief, now it's time to start over with that story, to start telling a different story, to redefine your story. So a few ways for us to tackle redefining our story, restructuring it. First, find proof that it isn't true. So what did you do before that actually worked? And how far have you gotten already? One of the happiness habits in the Slight Edge, Jeff Olson mentioned looking back on where you've already gotten to. We may think that we're not good enough to get to where we're trying to go, and we forget where we are now, and we also forget where we used to be. I used to be like for the storytelling thing, for example. I used to be even worse at telling stories, and I just would just write a film to just see stuff. And now I'm at least having some more depth, even if it's not in words. There's more depth in visual storytelling. That's a good start. For my stutter, finding the proof of that's not true, I've been able to have conversations with people, even with the stutter, and still carry impact. I've been doing this podcast, even with the stutter. I actually, in the first 7 episodes, I actually spent time editing out my stutters, and I decided that I'm going to leave them in because, for one, it's way too much work. I stutter a lot. Is too much work, and also that's cutting out a part of me. And I might as well keep it real with y'all. Another way for me to find proof that that's not true, I can think of 2 fantastic examples. One, if you ever watched the movie The King's Speech with, I cannot think of the dude's name off the top of my head, but he was in Kingsman. He was in something else I saw recently. Oh, he was in the Mary Poppins sequel. Anyway, but in that film, it's about a king in England. He's a king. He's supposed to be speaking in front of everybody, and he struggles with this stutter. And his stutter in that film was way worse than mine. Like, he could barely get out a whole sentence. I just stumble enough to get by. Like, I stumble enough and end up finishing the sentence eventually. But this person of power had a stutter and went through the therapy and stuff to overcome that. And then an even better example in the Bible, and Brittany reminds me of this all the time. Moses, somebody who was called to lead an entire nation of Jews out of slavery into freedom. He had a stutter. This is a dude who God called to lead an entire nation into the promised land, to write the laws on tablets, and to give God's command to these people, to speak in front of everybody. And he had a stutter. And nowhere in the Bible where it says he failed to do what he's supposed to do, and so he gave up. So those are boosters for me. Those are like encouragement shots for me. Like, if they can do that, so can I. So I said kind of nixing the storytelling thing. I still kind of want to keep it in because some of these things are going to be applicable. I at least want to assess applying these redefinitions of your story in, I guess, this sort of personal way that I'm dealing with, but also another, I guess, sort of out in the world practical way. So the next thing is to look for the positive. What did you think was an obstacle but turned out to work for your good? For me, matter of fact, for me, it was my job. It actually had it created 2 opportunities for both my stutter and my storytelling capabilities. So with my stutter, I actually work a job where I'm a call center agent taking calls. Average, I take like over 600, 700 calls a month. That is a lot of people to talk to. So I've had a numerous amount of exposure to talking with people and stuttering, stumbling over my words, and pushing through to finish the call. So there was proof in that. Not only was I able to talk with people even with the stutter, but there was the positive aspect was I got an overexposure to break down that initial limiting belief. Now I can move more confidently with the fact that I stutter. Now, like, I really don't care if I stutter. Sometimes, I have to take a deep breath because it took me so long to get some words out that I have to take a second breath to finish the sentence. But I'll sigh and move on, whatever. I stutter, whatever. I really don't care anymore. And then for the storytelling thing, I have a lot of time to read. So I'm reading these different books. The next book I actually want to read is a story by, I can't remember the author, but there's a book there that I want to read, and I'll have the opportunity with this job to get to know how to tell a story, get the elements necessary, the resources and the tools to get me where I got to go. So I'm not just stopping at, I don't know how to tell a story, so I just shouldn't do anything. But this is how you redefine your story. Even though I don't know how to tell a story, even if I don't pick up a book on how to tell a story, experience is the best teacher. So each film that I work on allows me to exercise my storytelling capabilities. And that in itself should be encouraging to say, I know that eventually I'll get there because I'll keep making projects that will stretch my capabilities. And the last thing to do would be to take this story, take this framework, and write it on paper and say it out loud. There is enormous power in putting things in writing and speaking it into the atmosphere, speaking it out loud for you to hear it and for those around you to hear it. Your mindset begins to believe it and begins to operate in that belief. So it's one thing to just think it, that your story's changed. But once you write it on paper, you have to actually see it and affirm that that's what you're saying. And then you're saying it out loud. You're hearing it. You're telling yourself, this is what I believe. I can be a good storyteller. I can be a great storyteller. And I have the resources and the tools and some time to get me there. I'm going to believe that, and that is going to reflect in the next steps that I take, the actions that I take. This story that we have to redefine and tell ourselves is not meant to just be on paper, but it's meant to propel us. It's meant to change our actions, because what we were telling ourselves was also dictating our actions. It kept us from acting. It kept us from moving too far into the right direction. It kept us from moving to a spot where we needed to be that would cause development. It may cause uncomfortability, but it would also cause growth and development. So we were already being dictated by our story before. Now with our new story, we're dictating new actions for us to take, new mindsets to operate in. So this is like the pivotal moment in your journey. Breaking down those old beliefs, those limiting beliefs, breaking down that fear, breaking down discouragement, change all of that so that moving forward, even though we may still face those things, we will not be shaken nor deterred. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share this with your friends and be on the lookout for the next episode. They come out every Wednesday morning. You can follow me on Instagram at _Josh the Creative, and you can find my music on SoundCloud under Lewis Effect. I'll catch y'all next week. Deuces.